Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be Chapter 2 of this reading. Noon on some goddamn Monday. I hate Mondays. I was sitting at a table outside a fast food restaurant that didn't have one of those plastic umbrellas set up to protect you from the weather. Of course, I didn't care. The rain felt good pattering against my body. Soothes the soul. I sat with my right foot on my left knee, my back to the entrance of the restaurant. I was pondering about something Grandpa Jijiku Shero had said to me long ago, before he disappeared. All I had with me was a small cup filled with soda from the restaurant, and my loyal servant, Wolf, who sat at my right side. She was a light-skinned Arctic wolf Alikins, with her heart set only on serving and worshipping me, which I thought was a bit weird since I allowed her freedom and she was given to me by father. It was harsh, but I meant it. Her wolf ears were slightly bigger than normal and 3 times sharper at hearing. Her magenta eyes could see 3 times greater than normal wolves, while they had a great shine to them. Her nose looked Kexan, but she could smell much better than any ordinary wolf. Her teeth and jaw muscles were as strong as a wolf's, with her fangs being as sharp as a razor. Trust me, I know. For some reason, she painted her claws magenta, which sparkled slightly. But as pretty as they were, she could tear through steel like thin paper with them. Once again, trust me, I know. And of course, she had a cute fluffy tail to show off that was as long as her smooth legs. However, at the time that we were on Earth, Wolf needed to be incognito, so I asked her to turn herself into her alternate wolf form, where she had an 1.5-inch width magenta dog collar around her neck. The collar had a platinum dog tag on it that was 1.5 inches around and said Wolf on both sides in cursive. Sitting in the rain, irritated at the fact that she was both getting wet and in her full animal form, Wolf asked, "My lord, why is it when we go to fast food restaurants you only get a small soda, when you can easily get an 8 or 24 pack of canned soda in one of the markets around here?" I looked over to see Wolf keep herself facing out towards the road that led up to the restaurant, speaking to me with a blank expression and had her ears bent down as if upset. She hated sitting in the rain, but she felt it necessary not to ask me to sit somewhere else. Not only that, but you don't even think to get any kind of food. Why? I asked as I went to stare out into the street with her, every now and then watching a car go by. You hungry? Wolf shook herself a bit to get some of the rain off, then said, "It just seems a little overrated. Plus, you know I don't like having to look like this. I feel exposed." Exposed? How so? Indecent, my lord. I glanced over at her, confused, where I noticed that she had placed her tail in between her legs. After I realized what she meant, I said, "Oh, well, right now." I looked around to see if there were any humans nearby. Then I continued to watch out towards the road as I said, "There isn't anybody around, only a few of them looking at us from inside the restaurant, so you can run over to the car and get your hat to cover your ears. Another thing, my lord, right now, we could be warm and dry if we were in the car, or possibly in the restaurant. But instead, you wish to be out here." "Is that a bad thing?" I asked with a slight smile, glancing back over at her. "You know they won't let you in there like that." Wolf looked over at me for a few seconds, still very irritated, then she turned back towards the road as she sighed. Depressed, she replied, "No, my lord, never mind." It was obvious that Wolf was upset at the fact that she had to stay outside with me, knowing that I loved the so-called bad weather. Yet, she really could do what she wants, so I had no idea why she was still staying with me. She also knew that whenever the weather was like this, I tend to stay outside all day. But I felt bad for making her sit outside with me, which I'm sure was what she wanted. Even so, I decided to forget about staying out and see how I could make her happy. She deserved it. "Come on, Wolf," I said, gently petting her head with my right hand. "What do you want to do?" She sniggled as she gave a light smirk, then asked, Did I make you feel bad, my lord? Just then, I thought, damn, she did it again. I hate it when she pulls off crap like that, just to make me feel bad. Oh well. Without expressing what I thought, I calmly replied, a little. Wolf sniggled some more and said, good. She then quickly jumped down and walked behind me as she said, I'll meet you in the car. When I turned to see her walking away, she said, I want to go to the library for a bit. With that, I thought, damn it. I knew today was going to be a bad day. I just knew it. Of all the places, it had to be the library. Why doesn't she observe humans the way I do? Just watch them as they live their lives. She doesn't have to read about them. At least observing them would keep us from having to be near them. Much. Fucking humans. I hate them. I despise humans. Every single one. They make me want to puke out my guts. Especially when they keep making things more and more complicated for themselves. It's very irritating and annoying. I hate humans. With every fiber of my being, I absolutely despise them. I can't even stand to talk to them, or even look at them. I may respect all living things like Mother had taught me, but I just hate humans. Mainly for their stupidity. I wish them all a most painful death. Irritated at what Wolf suggested, I quickly drank my soda and threw it away, yet I missed the garbage can by about half a foot. Humans do it, why can't I? I turned to my left towards the parking lot and 2 humans came out from the restaurant, both female and whispering to each other's ears as they cautiously walked towards me. I didn't know why, but I was sure it was because of me sitting out in the rain that they wanted to ask me something. However, I wasn't in the mood to deal with them. Before I reached the street into the lot, one of the humans called out to me. Excuse me, sir, she called out. Can we ask you something? I don't know what possessed me, but I stopped just at the curb as I turned my head slightly to my left and looked down at the ground. I then quietly spoke through my teeth and said to myself, son of a bitch. My Monday pain just kicked in. I turned to face them just as they got within 3 feet of me. I don't know why I even bothered trying to talk to them. I should have just kept walking. They're humans. They're used to being shunned. Do it to themselves in a way. Of course, I had already stopped in my tracks. So, in trying to scare the 2 away, I made my expression seem angry and moved my head up to stare down at them with a fierce gaze when I turned around. Once the 2 humans got close, the dark brunette one quickly stopped and stepped behind her friend. However, the blonde one was a little more courageous and got up to stand just about a foot away from me. She looked directly up into my eyes and said, "Whoa, that's awesome." "What?" I bluntly asked. "Your eyes, man. The color of them is pretty much glowing red." "That's because my eyes are glowing," I said. "They're shining, to be correct, and they're blood red, to be precise. Now what's the question? I'm in a hurry." Both of the girls looked at me, confused, then at each other as if they didn't have a clue of what to say. The blonde one, courageous as she was, seemed like an idiot, and the other, of course, was too afraid to do anything except stare. They both looked young, about 18 to 20, had skinny jeans, tight shirts, jackets with fake fur inside, and those weird shoes with graffiti on them. All of that, to me, looked like crap. It only made me want to ask how they move with it, or how they got it on in the first place. I hate those clothes. The blonde didn't seem cold, but she was holding a black umbrella over herself and her friend in her right hand. The brunette, however, was almost the opposite. She was shivering like crazy and seemed frozen to the bone. Ironically, the brunette looked the same as her friend, but with no makeup and 2 small gold circular earrings on each ear. That made me laugh a bit inside. The 2 humans whispered to each other, then turned to face me again. "Sorry about that," the blonde one said as she smiled. "I'm Amber, and my friend here is Jewel." Jewel gave a quick wave with her left hand and said, "Hi." "I'm Zaec," I said, putting my right hand out for a handshake. "Zaec, Shero." When I put my hand towards Amber, she said she doesn't usually shake hands, Then when I turned to Jewel, she got scared and stepped back behind her friend. Whatever. What is it? I asked. I thought when you introduce yourselves, you're to shake hands with one another. Amber gave a quick laugh and said, "Where did you come from, the 17th century? Hardly anybody does that anymore. And the few that do hardly ever do it either." With that, I slowly pulled my hand away and tightened it into a fist, becoming angry as I said, "Alright then." I then turned back towards the lot to head for my car as I said, "Forget it. You two can piss off." Just as I started walking, I heard Amber apologizing to call me back as she followed me, while Jewel followed her. She didn't even try to speak, so I guessed she was just following Amber to try and stop her. I couldn't believe what had happened. I was not only insulted by some mere peasant, I was insulted by a human. I swear, that bitch was blessed by the creator himself or something, because she was lucky as hell that I let her live. It took every ounce of my well-being to not just straight up beat the living shit out of her. Not even the fact that other people were watching and could have exposed who or what I was would have stopped me. About 3 feet to my car, I felt Amber grab my right arm and try to pull me back. Instead, in her failed effort to stop me herself, I stopped and stood still as she tripped by, actually pulling herself forward and plunging herself towards the front of my car. She tried to use her umbrella to stop herself, but broke it, only continuing to fall forwards onto my car. "Oh shit," she quickly said, just barely able to throw her hands out to brace herself against the hood. She then stood up and asked herself, "What the hell?" Afterwards, she quickly turned around and pointed her right finger at me and yelled, "What the hell is your problem?" Jewel immediately stopped right behind me, just as Amber started yelling. She gasped a little and tried to whisper to her friend to stop, but Amber just continued with, "What? You think you're the fucking president of the United States or something? All I wanted to know was why you were out here in the freezing rain. But you're too much of a stubborn jackass and a stuck-up prick apparently to talk to." Slightly confused, yet unmoved by her anger and idiotic choice of words, I glanced over into the passenger side of my car to see Wolf in her half-state, smiling and slowly shaking her head as she watched the human yell at me. I then looked back over at Amber as she continued. "And another thing you should know about yourself. The way you dress makes you look like a fucking serial killer." "And?" I calmly asked, "What about it?" "My god, dude," she said, calming down a bit, putting her right hand on her forehead as she shook her head slightly. "You have got to be joking." "What?" I asked, becoming impatient as I stepped my right foot towards her. "What is it?" Out of the corner of my eyes, I saw Wolf quickly jump out and run in between Amber and me, just as I yelled, "Tell me, or I will bash your skull into the hood of my car." Wolf quickly pushed both of her hands lightly against my chest as she said, "Ray, enough." She then quietly said, "She's not worth it. Let it go." It took me a minute, but I finally calmed down and took a step back from Amber. Wolf lowered her hands to hold my right hand as she turned to look over her left shoulder to the human and said, "Leave now. The situation's only going to get worse if you stay." Too bad Wolf forgot to get her hat before she stepped out of my car. Amber was slightly surprised as she looked up at Wolf's ears. I also glanced over my right shoulder to see that Jewel seemed almost petrified, with her wide open eyes staring at the ears too. "Who are you guys?" Jewel asked. "More like, what are you guys?" Amber corrected as she reached up for the ears with her left hand. She then stopped herself from touching them and asked, "Can I?" Wolf hesitated a little, yet responded by quickly shaking her head. In doing so, she put her ears as far down and back as she could. She didn't want to respond with words because she was afraid to expose her fangs as she had with her ears, even though it didn't matter at that point. As Amber slowly pulled her hand away, Wolf turned towards the human, but stepped back until she had pushed herself up against me, trying to cover up her tail. Once Amber placed her hand down, she quickly examined Wolf and asked, "Aren't you cold?" It was a good question for a human, but it was a bit stupid to me. Wolf was never affected by the weather, no matter how bad it was. She wore skin-tight white leather short shorts, with her black thong barely showing above it in the back and a hole for her tail to hang out. She had a small, skin-tight white tank top with thin straps that went over her shoulders and crossed at her upper back with her black bra straps showing slightly next to them. She had white 3-inch high heels that had 8 straps that went over the top of her feet, with 1 strap that went around the top of her heels. As a servant to the Shero family, being my personal servant, Wolf had black weight training gloves as well. And even in her half state, Wolf had her collar tightly strapped around her neck, the only piece of clothing that stayed within both of her forms. She had a slightly skinnier than average sized body and stood about 5 feet, 8 inches tall. Her hair was neon white and styled to hang straight down the sides of her head to her mid-neck. Wolf responded to Amber's question by shaking her head again and said, "I'm used to it." She then turned her head slightly to her right and quietly said, "Sorry, my lord." I gently put my hands on Wolf's shoulders and moved my mouth closer to her right ear, while keeping my eyes on Amber, and whispered, "It's okay, Wolf. Just get back in the car." She nodded as I removed my hands and looked around to see if anyone else was watching. Once I saw that there was no one else, I lightly pushed Wolf with my right hand to edge her forward. Wolf quickly walked around the human and opened the left side car door and quickly slammed it shut as she sat down, with Amber just keeping herself still when the Alikins walked by. I moaned, irritated that 2 humans had found out about Wolf, then I motioned for Jewel to move in front of me. Just as the humans were next to each other, I grabbed my right-hand pistol from under my left arm, then jerked it down to open the revolver, as I expected it, and said, "I'm sorry I have to do this." Amber and Joel quickly looked at each other in fear, then back at me terrified, as Amber asked, "What do you mean? You're not going to kill us, are you?" I laughed a little as I leaned myself back slightly, while jerking my hand up to latch my pistol. Then, as I motioned to face them again, I placed my pistol back into its holster and said, "That's one of the options I can give you, but I'm sure Wolf would hate me if I did that to 2 simple humans." I was actually going to say, "You can either forget what you just saw and pretend that this whole thing never happened, or you can come with us and have to live by our etiquettes. Which is it?" Amber sat there for a minute looking at the ground pondering, while Jewel whispered to her about what they should do. A few seconds passed and Amber looked over at her friend and started to argue a little. After about 4 minutes, they came to an agreement and looked back at me as they both simultaneously said, "Go with." I stared at both of them, confused and a little surprised, as I asked, "Are you sure?" Amber nodded her head and said, "Yeah, as long as you answer some questions about yourself when we ask." I gave them a smirk and said, "Okay, get in then." I walked around my car to the right side where the driver's seat was. It's set up that way because I was mostly right-handed with just about everything that doesn't have to do with combat. So, in case you were wondering, yes, I do drive with only one hand. I knew it wasn't going to be easy dealing with humans. I knew that day was going to be a bad day. I seriously hate Mondays. Amber examined my car a little bit, then quickly pointed down at it with both of her index fingers and asked, "This car here is your car?" The car I was driving looked like one of Earth's greatest 2-door tuner sedans, only to somewhat hide itself, but it was rebuilt by both my twin brothers' hands and mine. The metal we used was called Wavryn, and it only came from Cormorax, a planet that was used only to hold races within Wavryn and mine powerful minerals. Wavryn metal was far stronger than any Earth-based material and was as light as fiberglass. It was so strong that it could only be broken by something that was equal to or stronger, which was only itself at the time. Not even father or grandpa at their best could damage it in any way. However, like all metals, once you put enough heat into it, Wavryn was able to be bent and shaped to your liking. But even with heat, oddly enough, it couldn't completely destroy the metal material. My car had low-profile tires that always had perfect tread and had 20-inch rims on them. The calipers on the brakes that I installed were painted gloss yellow, and the brake rotors themselves were metallic black. The windshield wipers were dark yellow, with small spikes that were an inch apart and an inch high along the edges of the wipers, which of course was created by our hands. The rims on the tires had 5 3-inch thick spokes that had a slight forward rotation on them to the front of the car. The spokes were chrome black and the edge of the rims were chrome yellow. Plus, as any normal street racer from Wavryn, I hollowed out the inside of the rims a bit to put in loose steel ball bearings that just rolled around the inside edge of each rim. However, they would start to grind against the metal of the rims once the wheels spun at a certain speed. With the ball bearings, when the wheels started to kick at over 150 miles per hour, mph, the metal upon metal would start to spark a very bright blood red, with the sparks rising as the speed increased. Oddly enough, the sparks couldn't damage or harm anything. They were just for show. The body style was kept stock, from what some humans would say, but was painted metallic black with 2-inch thick yellow striped vinyls, both being an inch apart from each other, that went from the taillights to the headlights. The entire car had other vinyls that made it look as if it had blood dripping from the windows, headlights, taillights, doors, and under the side mirrors. There were also small streaks of blood drop vinyls on the windows and at the outer edges of the windows, with some of the vinyls on the fender around the wheels as if the tires kicked up blood. The spoiler was a home custom style that my twin and I made our first year on Earth, after of course finding one of the best vehicles on that damn planet to imitate. The ends of the spoiler went slightly past the stock body with a flat 20 by 12 inch panel that was 3 inches thick. The corners of the panels were spiked out 3 inches and had a single spike in the center of the panels that was 4 inches long. There was a galaxy-shaped vinyl that was yellow and faded outward to red, then faded to black with a thin white edging, covering the panel. The center panel that stretched across the trunk was 5 inches thick and was held up by 3 bars. Each looked like 2.5-inch thick screws that stood a foot high on the trunk door. The screws leaned slightly back from the car, with 1 bar in the middle and the other 2 at the left and right edges of the trunk door. Last was the headlight assembly, which appeared as if it was painted over black, but really it was the glass mixture Zaec and I crafted to make it look like that. The lights shine through yellow for the normal headlights and bright yellow for the high beams, which took 21,000K bulbs to do. Of course, humans didn't have that great of technology yet, so we had to make it ourselves from scraps of other bulbs that humans did have. It was pretty simple for us to create the headlight assembly because of how far our race was technologically advanced than humans. Even 30,000K bulbs were easy to create, so easy that a toddler could do it without knowing it. However, we don't get too into technology as humans do. That's just stupid, like humans. Once Amber had examined my car, she moved to face the front as she said, "This thing doesn't look street legal." No shit, I thought. Really? She then looked down at the small vinyls around my car and asked, "Is this actual blood?" I just stood there in silence with a smirk on my face when she asked that. She'd have to find out for herself, but she looked as though she didn't want to touch it. Amber then looked between the headlights and said, "The headlights are painted over." "Is that so?" I asked, uncaring. "What are you, stupid?" she barked as she looked up at me. "You won't be able to see anything in the dark or in the fog." I chuckled as I knocked on the window for Wolf to turn on the headlights. Then I said, "The glass for the headlights is a custom style that me and one of my brothers made." I walked over to the front of my car next to Amber as I turned towards it and continued, "As the lights shine through, the gases put into the glass make the lights shine as yellow. I also have a switch that I can use to rotate the headlights to a normal version whenever I may need it." While Amber and I stood in front of my car, Jewel just stood near Wolf's door with her hands in her jacket pockets. She was well beyond irritated from what I could tell, because she wanted to get out of the rain and get going. However, she just stood there glaring at her friend. "That doesn't seem possible," Amber said to me. "Yeah, well, having powers and being part of an advanced race is a wonderful thing, ain't it?" "What? Nothing." I quickly said, slightly turning away from her as I looked up at the clouds. Whatever. You know this thing isn't legal, especially with the paint that you put over the lights. It's not paint, I said as I turned towards her. Did you not hear what I just said? It's stained glass. I don't care, she barked as she looked over at me in anger. It's still illegal. So? My God. Amber put her right hand on her forehead as she turned away from me, then said, You have no idea. How many times have you been arrested? None. Bull crap, she barked, turning back while raising her right finger at me. I shook my head a bit and said, I'm not kidding. This thing's tuned to be the fastest and the best at handling than any other car on Earth. Literally. It's also reinforced with stronger metal than normal cars, so strong that it can rip through even armored cars if I try hard enough. So no cop can catch me no matter how hard they try. Amber stood there for a few seconds as she lowered her hand, then asked, Are you wanted? I myself am not wanted, I replied, putting my left fingers onto my chest. I then pointed to my car and said, But the car itself right now is in the top. I glanced up, trying to think about what to say next, then looked back down at her and said, 15, I think, all around the US and Japan. Amber just stood there with her mouth slightly open, staring at me like I was some crazy-ass person that she regretted meeting. We stood there in silence for about a minute. Then I broke the silence by quickly saying, Forget it, let's just go to the damn library now. As I turned to the driver's side of my car, I muttered to myself, Fucking human. I walked and swung the door open, then looked over at the human and said, Come on. Amber shook her head as she walked over to the left side of my car with Jewel. Wolf opened her door for them and pulled her seat forward a bit to let them sit in the back. As they did, Amber said to me, You better be a good-ass driver. Wolf moved the seat back and looked over at me with a smile, while I said, Whatever. I then sat down and got myself as comfortable as I could, adjusting my coat so I could sit on it easily. Hey, I like my style, and I don't want to keep removing and putting my coat back on. Reaching for my door, I bluntly said, Buckle up. With that, I slammed the door as Wolf and I laughed. Before I could start my car, Jewel looked around and said, You don't have any seatbelts, dude. Wolf glanced back at the human, confused, bending her left ear down slightly as her right pointed straight up. She looked cute like that. Wolf then looked over at me and asked, What the hell's a seatbelt? I gave a light sigh, then looked over at her and replied, Something that humans use to keep themselves from flying out their front and or side windows when they get even more stupid. They're these shitty little straps that go across the chest and hips to hold them down on the seats. Kind of like the energy belts I use when there's a sudden jerk in motion. Wolf turned back to face out the front window with a light smile and said, That's gay. Amber quickly shook her head in confusion for a second, while Joel looked over my left shoulder to see the dashboard. She then asked, How do you start this thing without an ignition switch? I just turned forwards and closed my eyes as I slammed my head onto the top of the steering wheel, irritated at the dumb questions that these two idiot humans were asking. Just as I hit my head on the wheel, Wolf looked over at me and giggled. After a few seconds, I moved to sit up again, while I shook my head and said, Whatever. With my powers, I didn't need an ignition switch to start my car. Didn't even need gas or oil to make it run. The entire car ran on my powers. The engine, the battery, windshield washer fluid, even the treads on the tires were controlled by my powers. Just about everything inside and out of my car was either made or was controlled by my powers. The car's design both in body and performance is only a base blueprint to run off. I placed my right hand onto the top right side of the steering wheel, while moving my left to grab the emergency brake, and said, Just sit back, or else you'll get a major whiplash. I started my car by pushing the brake pedal down and unlocking the e-brake. My car then turned on by making a loud engine rev that echoed for about a quarter mile. Quickly, I took my left foot off the brake pedal and slammed my right foot on the accelerator. The tires peeled out for a few seconds, forcing the ball bearings to grind and spark wildly. Then the treads gained grip and got us to take off. I had to quickly maneuver through the lot, trying not to hit any of the other cars parked around me, with some of the other drivers honking as I sped by. Just before we reached the stop sign to get out of the lot, I slammed on the brake pedal with my left foot while bracing myself with both of my hands against the steering wheel. Immediately, a translucent yellow wave of energy swung across everyone's chest and hips, kind of like a seatbelt, to keep us from being thrown forward. My car came to a quick, screeching halt at the stop sign, then wobbled before stabilizing. The energy belts disappeared and both Amber and Jewel were breathing heavily, shocked at what I had done, yet Wolf and I were perfectly calm. "God damn it, man," Amber yelled. "Where'd you learn to drive, psycho?" "I don't know where you're from, buddy," Jewel said, "but on Earth, in this county, you can get your ass thrown in jail for shit like that." "What, you some crazy-ass street racer or something?" Wolf and I laughed hearing that. Then she turned around to Amber and said, "Don't worry. Ray's actually a very good driver. Never crashed once in his many years on the road." "But he's been chased by the cops before, right?" Jewel asked. Wolf moved back in her seat, stared at me with a light smile. I turned to look over at her with a big grin on my face as I asked, "You want me to tell them, or will you?" She rolled her eyes and turned to stare out the front window, as did I, just to make fun of her. Then she replied, "Yeah, he has. But he's an idiot when it comes to outrunning them. One time, he actually put the car on top of a tree to get away." "What?" Amber barked. "No way you could have done that." "But I did," I said, quickly pointing my left finger up. I laughed as I lowered my hand, then said, "Stupid-ass sheriff." And that was before I had my car tuned up and painted to this nice metallic black, so it was easy to find. "What the fuck ever," Wolf said, looking over at me in anger. "You jumped off a cliff from the highway onto an old-ass broken and dead tree from about 100 fucking feet, you lunatic." I laughed even more at that as she continued, "Whatever." She then turned forwards and said, "Just get to the library." I quickly stopped laughing, looked over at her and sarcastically said, "What was that?" I said, just before Wolf could continue to repeat herself, I slammed on the clutch with my left foot while holding the e-brake up with my left hand. At the same time, I gave the accelerator a quick stomp so that the sound of the engine would drown out her words. I loved doing that to her, even if it angered her a bit. It was fun. "What was that?" I asked again, still being sarcastic. "I couldn't hear that clearly." Wolf sat there for a second, irritated, knowing that I was messing with her. Then she looked over at me and said, "I hate you." I gave the accelerator another quick stomp, which made her reply by raising her right hand at my face level and keeping her middle finger up at me. "You know," Amber said as she pointed to a tan, one-story federal building on top of a hill to the left of us, "the cops are right over there. They can probably hear you revving your engine." I laughed for a bit, and I glanced up at the building and said, "There's nothing they can do to stop me." "What are you, a complete moron? You're going to get us arrested doing stupid crap like that. Just drive like a normal person." "Whatever," I bluntly said, looking back out towards the road as everyone settled down. I cautiously pulled out of the lot, like a normal driver, just to satisfy the humans' needs. Then we headed off towards the library. This concludes the reading of Chapter 2. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there will be a link to my physical works in the description below. And with that being said, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week reading Chapter 3.